Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Talk Diaries with me, Tanya Beckett. This time we would like to talk about so-called grey zone conflict. We hear that expression quite a lot, particularly recently, as we're finding the Ukraine conflict spilling over into places that we had not anticipated, and perhaps certainly beyond the boundaries of Ukraine as the war seems to broaden. What that means is that we see in the news reports of attacks on factories, cyber attacks, and in the ocean, which is what we're going to talk about in the waters in a moment. So with me, fortunately, to do that is Nick Lambert. Nick Lambert is formerly in the Navy, Rear Admiral. He's also a maritime security specialist and proponent of the blue economy. And Nick, of course, I'm Tanya Beckett, and I probably should have said that at the start, but we'll have our names coming up, so that's fine. Grey zone. Let's just talk about what we mean by grey zone and why is this hitting people's consciousness now?
Good morning, Tanya. And actually, you did say that you were Tanya Beckett, so
Good.
fine. You got it right. You got it
A bit
right.
of a senior moment.
Know who you are. Grey zone, interesting. A grey zone. There are so many different definitions of it. One is that it's an area where more hostile activities can take place between states and third or even fourth party actors. The other is a geographical interpretation of it in my mind, and that is a sea space. Because you've said ocean, I'd like to bring people's attention to sea spaces, to what we call continental shelf waters. So those waters that are generally shallower than 200 meters. And in particular, many countries, there are 156, I think, countries in the world that have a coastline. They have exclusive economic zones. An exclusive economic zone, for sake of argument, goes out 200 miles, and states have ownership of the assets, the natural assets within those sea spaces. So there's a blue natural capital in the sea space. And once you start doing things in a sea space, let's say shipping or fishing or offshore wind, then you have man-made capital. And the whole lot stacks up to a value and a place of importance.
So just to stop you there and go back to this grey zone concept, the reason that we call it grey zone is because these attacks it's not easy to work out who has been perpetrating these attacks, whether they're on land or sea, and that's why they're called grey zone. But what we're going to get to here is that when they happen in the water, there are lots of assets there, and it's not easy to protect those assets. But would you argue that as the Ukraine war has progressed, we've seen more of those types of attack in sea space?
Right, there's a lot of things to have a go at there. First of all, attack. What's an attack and what's an accident? So if you are a vessel, you're a fishing vessel, and you drag your anchor and you take out a subsea telecommunications cable, is that an accident or is it an attack? So that's something to think about. I think that the Ukraine war, going on for 3 years now, the activities in the Black Sea, in the Baltic Sea, the tensions that have built up around those areas, the security tensions that have built up around those areas, have brought this into quite stark relief for the more general public, which is why we're having this conversation. And I have to say, thank you for starting the conversation because it's really, really important. So it's brilliant. Having been in the Navy I joined the Navy over 40 years ago. We used to worry about the sorts of things that are going on today, but people didn't really listen in the way that they are now. And the reason for that is we've got so many assets at sea, so many people in our waters, so many things that are going on, so much value in those spaces. We're worried about the things that are happening.
So when you say there's a lot of value in those spaces, are you talking about shipping or other stuff?
Right, so that's where the blue economy comes in. We won't go down that in great detail, but you've got to think about this think of these spaces as human, social, and economic thoroughfares. So take somewhere like the Arabian Gulf. I spent many hours of my life at 500 feet in a helicopter flying up and down the Gulf. If you look down, it's just a plethora of activity. There's shipping, there's ferries, there's fishers, there's yachties, there's oil and gas, there's wind, there's artificial islands. It's just an economic area. Let's give you some examples. The North Sea, there are roughly speaking 55,000 people at sea in the North Sea on a daily basis. It's not big handful, small maps. South China Sea, tens of thousands. 30, I think there are 30,000 fish farms in the Mediterranean. 60%, sorry, 50% of all UK offshore wind or all UK energy will be generated offshore by 2050. These are really, really busy places. Final example. When I was a midshipman many moons ago, in 1979, on fish protection patrol in the North Sea, there was 20% more navigable sea space then than there is today. That means that offshore infrastructure has taken up 20% of the sea space that we used to navigate freely in. So these are areas that are of huge significance and value to the nations that own them.
We also hear a lot about pipelines and underwater cables. Um, is there a lot of that they are very exposed, and there's a lot of it about in terms of the cables, certainly.
Well, if you have wind farms offshore, you've got to get the wiggly amps ashore. So you need lots of copper. So you need interconnectors. You need cables to put the power ashore and get it into the grid. So once this is your energy source, once you've got that sort of percentage of your national grid taking power from offshore, they become critical national infrastructure. If you put an interconnector between two nations, Denmark and the UK, Norway and the UK, that's critical regional infrastructure. If you have a subsea telco that goes out across the Atlantic to the States, that's critical international infrastructure. And the amount of traffic on these is vast. It's vast. 99% of all UK internet traffic goes by subsea telcos. There are about 600 subsea telcos connecting the world. There are countless copper cables taking power to and from. There are oil pipelines, gas pipelines. It is an intricate network of infrastructure and activity. Very exciting.
Exciting. So, in your experience in the Navy, you said what you saw in the Arabian Gulf, that it was almost probably like the M25 in the UK. There was just a lot going on. But when you are interacting with other vessels, of course, a lot of them will be civilian vessels, won't they? Or is it sometimes difficult to tell?
Oh, it's vast majority are civilian, one form or another. In the summertime, thousands of yachts, thousands of fishing vessels, hundreds of vessels, hundreds of ships. I think the numbers for the Dover Straits is very easy to keep giving these massive numbers, but I think that the numbers for the Dover Straits certainly match the numbers of landings and takeoff at Heathrow, for example. So that's the traffic, shipping traffic going through the Dover Straits. If you sail across the channel, as I did in the summer, you will just see a long line of vessels making their way up from the corner of France and up towards Dover. So it's up from Biscay and round the corner into Dover. It's just a continuous stream of traffic.
Now, when we
Ah,
were hearing recently about developments in the Ukraine war, there was a moment where Russian drones appeared to be going into Poland, and there was a very clear warning from the Defense Minister, Radek Sikorski, about exactly what would happen if that persisted. But that's land. International law may not be as clear when we're talking about water.
good point. I think it's international law and also national law. So what do you do? So in the Baltic, a vessel deliberately dragged its anchor for a long period of time and severed an important cable. Eventually, that vessel was impounded. What are you going to do in the event that somebody carries out a deliberate act of sabotage or an attack, as you described, and you can board that vessel, impound it? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to? Have you got the law in place? Have you got the legal requisite to do something about that vessel to stop those sorts of attacks from happening? Now
What
we
is the answer to that question? Do we have surveillance? How difficult is
well the
surveillance?
so that now that's just let's not mix this up. So I think we have some of the law. I'm not sure we've thought it all through to the nth degree. There's a willpower. You need to have the will to do something about it. So are you going to stop them? Are you going to shoot the drones down? Are you going to shoot down manned aircraft in terms of overland? Are you going to stop these vessels or actors from carrying out these activities? Or if you get them, are you going to take them to court and imprison them? And if you can't, if you haven't got the legal stuff in place, are you just going to impound them? What are you going to do? What's your will to do it? And which government department is going to do it? And do you need different government departments? Do you need to think through how you're going to do this? So that's the first thing. The second thing is you can manage a sea space. You can understand what is going on in a given sea space. So I've used some examples: Persian Gulf, South China Sea, Malacca Strait, Singapore, North Sea. You can, if you throw enough beans at it, you can have all the information you need to understand that sea space. The technology is not the issue. The issue is the understanding the value of the assets that are out there, and therefore the value of the sea space, understanding who's out there and what they're doing, and then building a picture and sharing that understanding of that sea space. We call that mostly maritime domain awareness. And it has a dual functionality because it brings social and economic and environmental benefits, as well as security and ultimately defense. So it's thinking about how you put assets into a space, how you plan the use of space. We call it marine spatial planning, and how the different players interact in it. So you have government players and you have privately owned companies, for example, who own all the subsea telcos. How do those agencies work together? How do you license them to put those cables in, or those power cables, or those wind farms? So it's thinking about the fact that you own a sea space exactly the same way as you own a landmass.
And just to come back to the Ukraine war before we move on to other issues, and more particular, the blue economy, um, ships cannot pass, as I understand it, or there is a restriction on what passes through the Bosphorus. And that is imposed, I guess, by Turkey, and that affects what happens in the Black Sea in the context of the Ukraine war and has been advantageous to Ukraine. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, this is all to do with the rights of passage in international waters, and where international waters are described as such. Straits are generally the terminology, and there are certain rights of passage for those straits. So if you think about the world's choke points, there are generally regarded about 13 maritime choke points. I've mentioned Dover, you've mentioned Bosphorus, Malacca Straits, Gibraltar Straits, Panama Canal, Suez Canal, those sorts of places. Those you have certain rights of passage and restrictions. So that's how those spaces are managed. My point is, if something is taking place in your exclusive economic zone, what are you going to do about it? What agency is going to take charge of it? Which agency is going to take charge of it, or what are they allowed to do?
Right. I think you've highlighted very accurately what the problem is. But the fact is that you've been traveling the waters for some years, and you would say actually there's often been rather mysterious stuff going on, and submarines or ships lurking where, with perhaps slightly shady intentions. I mean, that's nothing new, is what I'm trying to say.
No, so that I've been poking around. The first example of a submarine of a subsea telco sabotage action, I believe, was in 1914 when the British cut 4 of 5 German subsea telco cables, as they were then. They were probably doing Morse code on them, and they tapped the 5th one and monitored it for the rest of the First World War, as I understand. And then there are many other examples over the years. You can think through things like GPS jamming in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's been going on for quite a long time. The Somali pirates and so forth. So those are all examples
And the
of,
Houthis in Yemen more
and the
recently.
Houthis, which is more recent. So these are examples of things that have taken place. I think that the difference, I think there are 2 points I would make. One is the plethora of infrastructure that I described earlier. over the last, say, 3 to 4 decades. So starting with oil and gas. And of course, now all that technology, all those skills, that ability to do stuff at sea has enabled us to do offshore wind and aquaculture and so forth. So we now have much, much more significant critical infrastructure offshore than we had before. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the international rules-based approach is fragmenting a bit, isn't it? It's going a bit flaky around the edges, and almost no bets are off. People are willing to do things such as sabotage Nord Stream 2 or drag a cable across
Which
a
is the
vital
pipeline that goes through the North. I mean, this
that
was
was the
anyway controversial, going from Russia through the
there were
Baltic.
two, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, and of course there's all sorts of debate about who it was, who we won't bother with it now, but who it was that did it. But
Well, the
my
fact that
goodness,
that debate went on for so long, it
yes,
proves
and
our
it had
point,
a
doesn't it?
huge impact on the German economy,
Yeah.
instantaneous. So and understanding what's at sea at any one time, be it by cable or pipeline or ship, a large proportion of the UK's gas supplies are at sea in ships at any one time. I think it's about 3 or 4 days worth. Japan almost entirely reliant on gas and oil exported from the Gulf. These these flows are constantly going around our globe. If you look back to the Ever Given instance where the ship went aground in the Suez Canal was a real wake-up call for everybody. From my point of view, from a maritime security perspective, it was a very useful moment, leaving aside the cost and so forth, because it woke people up to the vital nature of that route and how much um, how much value was stacked up at either end of the Suez Canal and what the impact was on our just enough, just in time global logistics network. So the exciting thing is understanding the complexity of these sea spaces, the value of them, and then managing them for the purposes of getting social and economic benefit from them, primarily, addressing the environmental impact that we have through those human, social, and economic activities. But then the duality point. If you build a motorway, you need to provide traffic lights and police cars, and you need to manage it. You've got to look after it. You've got to provide security, so enable people to use it. You need to do the same thing at sea. So then you get maritime security. That means you need people and assets to do the maritime security, and you need maritime domain awareness, as I've said. And that all enables you to better manage your sea space and actually give yourself more warning time of any potentially unreasonable behavior before they even get to your landmass. So it's very exciting.
You've mentioned a word there about, conservation. So we've talked about there being a huge amount of economic activity in the seas and the potential, no doubt, to exploit it more. The question is about protection. And this has been highlighted, of course, in David Attenborough's film recently. And I think a lot of people saw some footage there that horrified them. Are we taking good enough care of our seas? Not even close, are we?
Right, Tanya, this you've got me on I'm in danger of taking down a rabbit hole. So do wave your arms around in horror if you wish. I was privileged to be captain of an icebreaker operating in Antarctica for a couple of years, and that was my real wake-up call to the state of our seas and oceans. So the fact we need a proper map of our ocean and the fact that we need to manage our sea spaces properly. It's horrifying to see a Pepsi can or cola bottle floating in the middle of the South Atlantic when you've been at sea for 7 days and not seen a single thing, and then you see plastic and rubbish out there. So we have seen our ocean as a sort of giant dustbin, and there was a lot of scientific thought that actually it could absorb all that sort of stuff. We now know it can't, and we also know that it is essential to our climate and to our ability to live on this planet. We live on planet Ocean, not planet Earth. And so we really have done massive damage to our seas and oceans. We don't have enough information. So one of the things we can do is gather information. So all those offshore infrastructure assets out there could be fitted with sensors to gather marine environment data. And in my view, we should be taking a regenerative approach to our sea space. So if you put in a wind farm or a fish farm, you should put it in such a way that you regenerate the space in which you put it. You don't want to sustain a place that's already been damaged. You want to make it better. It's never going to be the same as it was naturally before man came along, but it can be better. So if you're putting in a wind farm or an oil and gas platform or an interconnector artificial island, put some extra concrete and steel in there and make an artificial habitat and grow that life around it. If you plan a wind farm carefully, you will stop certain types of fishing, most types of fishing, and we know that fish stocks will recover in that area. So then you have a marine managed area by default. So why not major on that and really think about how you are going to I hate this term. I think we should move away from decommissioning to recommissioning. So don't say, right, at the end of 25 years, you need to pull out all of your copper cables and all the rest of it, or the concrete that you use and all the rest of it. Why don't you say, let's recommission it as an artificial habitat? And then you get extension, long-term approach to it.
So I want some hope to end with. What are the technologies or the initiatives that are helping us regenerate the oceans and deal with some of these issues? I mean,
I
you hear
love
about oil spills and goodness knows what going on,
Yeah, so there's a pragmatism. You have to be pragmatic about this. We want 30 by 30, so we want 30% of the oceans protected as marine protected areas by 2030, and the UN's been driving that, and that's a very laudable target and objective. But pragmatically, if we're going to sustain the global population that we've got, we have to get social and economic benefit from the sea spaces that we own and from the high seas. So there's a pragmatism to this. I love the idea of hope. I think there is a lot of hope. I think if people understand that we have this blue economy, we have this space with opportunity to drive social and economic activity, then people will begin to go out there, and they already are out there and investing. What we need is it's more a cultural change. We need people to understand what goes on at sea. So thank you, Tanya, for giving us this opportunity to tell people about it. And once they understand it, then they'll start to be inquisitive. Maybe we can start to create different kinds of people who will work across the current sectors in marine and maritime. So people who will understand fishing and aquaculture and wind farms and oil and gas, and the marine spatial planning will be more coordinated and they'll be thought through in terms of the need for maritime security. We might actually lead that through into contributing to defence. And we might think about different institutions that would be developed to coordinate the sharing of information and so forth. So I don't think that technology is the issue. We've got more yellow boxes and things that can do clever things and you can shake a hairy stick at. I think we need cultural engagement. We need people to understand that we own this sea space. Our land mass often is smaller than our sea space. And we have these assets and these resources that we can benefit from. And in so doing, we will regenerate some of the marine environment, will sustain it in the longer term, will make it more secure, and will make life difficult for those who wish to cause it harm.
Thank you very much indeed. Rear Admiral Nick Lambert, thanks for joining us on the Talk Diaries.
Thank you, Tanya. It was a privilege.